300 Apache warriors don't just appear at dawn unless someone broke a sacred rule. But yesterday, all Willa Shepherd did was bandage a dog's wounded leg behind the barn, a simple act of kindness that should have meant nothing to anyone. Yet here they were, an entire war party standing motionless in perfect formation on the ridge above Judson Pryor's ranch, their faces painted for something far more serious than war. Willa pressed her face against the window, her hands trembling as she counted the silhouettes against the morning sky. She'd been fired just 12 hours ago for wasting supplies on a worthless animal. Now, the same dog sat calmly beside the lead warrior, its bandaged paw clearly visible even from this distance. The strangest part, the warriors weren't attacking. They weren't even moving. They were waiting. Judson Pryor had built his ranch on one unbreakable principle: never show weakness to the Apache, never give them an inch, never let them think you owed them anything. It had kept him alive for 15 years in this unforgiving territory. But something about that dog had changed everything. Something Willa didn't understand. Something that made 300 of the most feared fighters in the territory travel through the night just to stand on his land at sunrise. The lead warrior raised his hand, and Willa's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about territory or stolen cattle or any of the usual reasons for conflict. This was about honor. And somehow, without knowing it, Willa had just become the most important person within a 100 miles. 24 hours earlier, Willa Shepherd was just another ranch hand trying to earn her keep in the harshest territory west of the mountains. She'd been mucking stalls since dawn, her boots caked with mud and her shirt soaked through with sweat, when she heard the whimpering behind the old barn. The dog was barely alive, a beautiful animal with thick fur marked in patterns she'd never seen before. Its left hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood matted the fur around a deep gash, and flies buzzed around the wound. Most people would have put the animal out of its misery with a single shot, but Willa had never been most people. She knelt beside the suffering creature, her calloused hands gentle as she examined the injury. The dog's dark eyes watched her with an intelligence that made her chest tighten. This wasn't some wild stray. Someone cared about this animal. Someone was probably searching for it right now. "Easy, boy," she whispered, tearing strips from her spare shirt. "I've got you." The sound of boots crunching on gravel made her freeze. Judson Pryor's voice cut through the afternoon air like a whip crack. "Willa, what in blazes are you doing back there?" She could hear him approaching, his heavy steps, deliberate and impatient. Panic shot through her as she realized how this would look. Her using valuable medical supplies on a wounded animal when there were cattle to tend and work to be done. Pryor had fired men for less, just checking the fence line. "Mr. Pryor," she called back, her voice steadier than she felt. The dog whimpered softly, its eyes never leaving her face. Blood continued to seep through the makeshift bandage she'd fashioned. Without proper care, the animal would be dead by morning. But if Pryor caught her treating it, she'd lose the only job that kept her from starving in this unforgiving land. Footsteps stopped just around the corner of the barn. "Well, get back. To the horses. We've got 20 head to move before sundown, and I won't have you wasting time on whatever foolishness has caught your attention." Willa's heart hammered as she watched the dog struggle to lift its head. She could walk away, should walk away. It would be the smart thing to do. But as those intelligent dark eyes met hers again, she knew she couldn't live with herself if she abandoned this creature to die alone. She made her choice, and it would change everything. That night, Willa crept back to the barn with stolen supplies and a determination that surprised even her. The dog lay exactly where she'd left him, weaker now, but still breathing. She worked by moonlight, cleaning the wound properly and setting the broken leg with splints fashioned from barn wood. "You're going to make it," she whispered, wrapping the bandages tight. "I promise you that." The animal seemed to understand. It rested its head against her knee while she worked, occasionally, lifting its eyes to watch her face. There was something unsettling about that gaze, not wild or frightened like most injured animals, but calm and knowing, as if it recognized something in her that she didn't recognize in herself. By morning, she'd used half the ranch's medical kit, worth 2 months' wages easily. But the dog was stable, drinking water from her cupped hands and even taking small pieces of dried meat. The relief in those dark eyes made every risk worthwhile. She was cleaning up the evidence when Nolan Cassidy found her. The young ranch hand stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the dog, his face going pale under his wide-brimmed hat. "Willa, what have you done?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more fear than she'd ever heard from the usually confident cowboy. "I saved his life. What does it look like I've done?" Nolan took a step backward, his eyes fixed on the dog's distinctive markings. "Do you have any idea what that is?" "It's a dog, Nolan. An injured dog that needed help. That's not just any dog." His hand moved unconsciously to his gun belt. "Look at those markings. Look at the way it's watching us. That's a war dog, Willa. Apache trained." The words hit her like a physical blow. Apache. She looked down at the animal resting peacefully against her leg, its wound clean and leg properly splinted. The same Apache who'd been raiding settlements 50 miles south. The same Apache that Judson Pryor had spent 15 years teaching his men to fear and hate. "You can't tell anyone," she said quickly. If Pryor finds out, he'll hang you for treason." Nolan's voice was grim, and then he'll probably shoot the dog just to make a point. A door slammed somewhere across the ranch yard, heavy boots on wooden steps. Judson Pryor's voice calling her name, sharp and demanding. In the morning light, she could see everything clearly now. The scattered medical supplies on the barn floor, the dog's distinctive markings, and the look of absolute terror on Nolan's face. But it was too late to undo what she'd done. And deep down, even knowing what she knew now, she realized she wouldn't change a thing. Judson Pryor's face turned the color of dried blood when he found her. He stood in the barn doorway like an avenging force, his weathered hands clenched into fists as he took in the scene. The scattered medical supplies, the carefully bandaged dog, and Willa kneeling protectively beside the animal. 20 years, he said, his voice deadly quiet. 20 years I've built this ranch by following one simple rule. Never give them an inch. Never show weakness. And you? He pointed at her with a trembling finger. You've just thrown it all away for a flea. Bag. Mr. Pryor, if you'd just let me explain. Explain! His voice exploded across the barn, causing the dog to lift its head alertly. You use my medical supplies to treat an Apache war dog. Do you have any idea what you've done? Willa's heart sank. So he knew exactly what the animal was. He was dying. I couldn't just... Yes, you could have. You should have. Pryor stepped closer, his boots grinding against the hay-strewn floor. That dog belongs to them. It's trained to track, to hunt, to lead war parties straight to settlements like ours. And instead of putting it down like any sensible person would, you've nursed it, back to health and sent up a signal flare that we're weak. Nolan shifted uncomfortably beside the barn wall. Mr. Pryor, maybe don't. Pryor's glare shifted to the young cowboy. Don't even think about defending this foolishness, Cassidy. She's compromised everything we've worked to build here. But something was wrong with Pryor's reaction. Willa had expected anger, even violence. What she hadn't expected was the fear she could see creeping around the edges of his fury. This wasn't just about wasted supplies or showing weakness to hostile neighbors. There's something you're not telling me, she said quietly. What makes this dog so special? Pryor's jaw worked silently for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her stomach drop. That animal doesn't just belong to any Apache. Look at the collar, girl. Really, look at it. For the first time, Willa examined the thin band of leather around the dog's neck. What she'd taken for simple decoration was actually intricate beadwork and patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the morning light. At the center, burned into the leather itself, was a mark she didn't recognize, but somehow understood meant something far more significant than she'd imagined. "Who is it?" she whispered. Pryor's face had gone ashen. "That's the mark of Ayana's son, the war chief they call Ghost Walker. And if his dog dies on my land, every Apache in 3 territories will consider it an act of war." The barn fell silent, except for the dog's quiet breathing. Willa looked down at the animal resting trustingly against her leg. Its life saved by her compassion. Its existence now a death sentence for everyone on the ranch. "But it's not going to die," she said softly. "I made sure of that." Pryor stared at her for what felt like hours. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "Pack your things, Willa. You're off my land by sundown." Willa packed her few belongings in the fading afternoon light, her hands shaking as she folded her spare shirt and rolled up her bedding. The dog had followed her from the barn, limping but determined, refusing to leave her side despite its injured leg. Every few minutes it would look toward the hills with an alertness that made her skin crawl. "You can't take it with you," Nolan said from the doorway of the bunkhouse. He'd been watching her pack, his face grim with worry. "I'm not taking him anywhere. He's following me." She stuffed her few possessions into a canvas bag. "Besides, where am I supposed to go? The nearest town is 40 miles through Apache territory." "Maybe that's the point." Nolan glanced nervously toward the window. "Maybe Pryor figures if you're going to die, better it happens off his land." The brutal honesty of it hit her like a physical blow. She'd saved an animal's life, and now she was being cast out to die for it. But as she looked down at the dog resting beside her feet, its dark eyes watching her with what looked almost like gratitude, she couldn't bring herself to regret her choice. "There's something else," Nolan continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I was up on the north ridge checking the fence line an hour ago. Saw smoke signals, 3 of them evenly spaced along the horizon." Willa's blood turned to ice. "What did they say?" "I don't know. Apache smoke talk. But I know what it means when they start communicating across that much distance." He moved closer to the window, peering out at the darkening landscape. "They're organizing something big." As if responding to their conversation, the dog suddenly lifted its head and released a low, haunting howl that carried across the ranch. Not the desperate cry of a wounded animal, but something deeper and more purposeful, a call that seemed to echo off the distant hills. Within seconds, an answer came back. Then another, and another. "Dear God," Nolan breathed. "They're out there all around us." Willa shouldered her pack and moved toward the door, the dog limping faithfully beside her. She could see lights beginning to flicker in the main house, could hear Pryor shouting orders to the other hands. The ranch was preparing for a siege. "Where are you going?" Nolan grabbed her arm. "I don't know, but I won't be responsible for a massacre." She looked back at the home she was losing, at the only life she'd known for 3 years. "Maybe if I leave, they'll follow me instead of attacking the ranch. Or maybe they'll kill you and attack anyway." She paused at the threshold, the dog waiting patiently at her feet. In the distance, more howls echoed through the night air, closer now and more numerous. Whatever was coming would arrive by dawn, and she had a terrible feeling that her simple act of compassion had set forces in motion that none of them truly understood. "Tell Pryor something for me," she said quietly. "Tell him that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than staying safe." The dog looked up at her and wagged its tail once as if it understood and approved. Together they walked into the darkness, not knowing whether they were walking toward salvation or doom. Willa walked through the night with only starlight to guide her, the dog limping steadily beside her, despite its bandaged leg. Every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes. Every sound made her heart race, but the animal showed no fear. Instead, it guided her with subtle changes in direction, leading her away from the ranch toward a destination she couldn't fathom. Around midnight, they crested a small hill, and she saw them. Campfires dotted the landscape like fallen stars, stretching in a wide arc that surrounded Pryor's ranch completely. Not dozens of fires, hundreds. The entire Apache nation seemed to have gathered in the darkness, and they'd been positioning themselves while she was packing her belongings. "Sweet Mary," she whispered, sinking to her knees. This wasn't a war party. This was an army. But they weren't attacking. They were waiting, just as they had been at dawn in her nightmare vision, waiting for something that she still didn't understand. The dog sat beside her and released another of those haunting howls. This time the response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices rose from every fire. Not the war cries she'd expected, but something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like singing. A figure emerged from the shadows ahead of her. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent his entire life in this harsh landscape. Even in the darkness, she could see the intricate patterns painted on his face and the eagle feathers braided into his long hair. This was no ordinary warrior. The dog limped forward eagerly, tail wagging, and the man dropped to one knee to embrace the animal. His hands found the bandages, examining her work with careful fingers, and when he looked up at her, his expression was unreadable. "You are the one who saved him," he said in English that carried only the slightest accent. "Yes." Her voice came out as barely a croak. "Are you? I am the one they call Ghost Walker, and this is my companion, my brother, my guide in the hunt," he continued, stroking the dog's fur. 3 days ago, he was taken by mountain cats while we tracked deer in the high country. I searched everywhere, followed blood trails until they disappeared into rock. I thought he was dead. Willa forced herself to meet his gaze. He was nearly dead when I found him, but he's strong. He fought to live. Ghostwalker studied her for a long moment. His dark eyes reflecting the distant firelight. "My people have a law. When someone saves the life of another's family member, a debt is created, a sacred debt that must be repaid." "I don't want anything," she said quickly. "I just couldn't let him suffer. I know. That is why the debt is so great." He stood, towering, over her in the darkness. "You could have killed him. You could have ignored him. Instead, you risked everything to heal him. In our way of thinking, this means his life now belongs to you." The implications of his words hit her like a thunderbolt. "That's why you're all here. My warriors came to witness the repayment of honor. What you call a debt, we call sacred balance. The woman who saved my brother's life must receive equal value in return." But something in his tone suggested this wasn't going to be as simple as she hoped. Ghostwalker looked toward the distant ranch where lanterns now burned in every window and the silhouettes of armed men moved frantically along the fence lines. "Your boss, the one who cast you out. He thinks we came for war, didn't you?" Willa struggled to understand the situation she'd somehow created. The debt of honor cannot be repaid with violence. It must be repaid with something of equal value to what was given. His expression grew solemn. "You gave your livelihood, your safety, your future to save one life. According to our law, I must give the same." The weight of his words settled on her slowly. "What does that mean?" "It means at sunrise I will offer Judson Pryor a choice. He can accept our gift of peace and prosperity, or he can continue believing that showing mercy is weakness." Ghostwalker's voice hardened. "But the debt will be paid either way." Willa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. What kind of gift? The kind that will make his ranch the most protected and profitable in 3 territories. The kind that will ensure no Apache warrior ever raises a hand against his property or his people. He paused, studying her face in the starlight. or the kind that will make him understand why compassion is strength, not weakness. And if he refuses, Ghostwalker's smile was grim. Men like Pryor rarely understand honor until it costs them everything they think they value. But you. He looked at her with something approaching respect. You understood it instinctively. That is why my warriors will follow your word tomorrow, not his. The implications crashed over her like a flood. 300 Apache warriors were prepared to honor her judgment about Judson Pryor's fate. A woman he'd fired for showing kindness to an injured animal now held more power over his future than he'd ever possessed himself. I never wanted this, she whispered. The best leaders never do. Ghostwalker moved toward his horse, a magnificent animal that emerged from the shadows like a spirit. Rest now. Tomorrow, you will decide whether your former employer learns the value of mercy through reward or through loss. Wait. Panic rose in her throat. I can't make that kind of choice. I don't have the right to decide what happens to other people's lives. Ghostwalker's voice hardened. But the debt will be paid either way. Willa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. What kind of gift? The kind that will make his ranch the most protected and profitable in 3 territories. The kind that will ensure no Apache warrior ever raises a hand against his property or his people. He paused, studying her face in the starlight. Or the kind that will make him understand why compassion is strength, not weakness. And if he refuses, Ghostwalker's smile was grim. Men like Pryor rarely understand honor until it costs them everything they think they value. But you... He looked at her with something approaching respect. You understood it instinctively. That is why my warriors will follow your word tomorrow, not his. The implications crashed over her like a flood. 300 Apache warriors were prepared to honor her judgment about Judson Pryor's fate. A woman he'd fired for showing kindness to an injured animal now held more power over his future than he'd ever possessed himself. I never wanted this, she whispered. The best leaders never do. Ghostwalker moved toward his horse, a magnificent animal that emerged from the shadows like a spirit. Rest now. Tomorrow you will decide whether your former employer learns the value of mercy through reward or through loss. Wait. Panic rose in her throat. I can't make that kind of choice. I don't have the right to decide what happens to other people's lives. Ghostwalker paused, one foot in the stirrup. You made that choice when you chose to save a life instead of protect your job. Every act of courage creates consequences, and every consequence demands new choices. He mounted gracefully, looking down at her from the saddle. The question is whether you'll have the same courage tomorrow that you showed yesterday. He rode back toward the fires, leaving her alone on the hilltop with the dog and the terrible knowledge that come dawn, she would hold the fate of everyone on Pryor's ranch in her hands. In the distance, the singing continued, and she realized it wasn't celebration she was hearing. It was preparation. 300 warriors preparing to honor a debt that could reshape the entire territory, all because she couldn't bear to watch a wounded animal die alone. The dog pressed against her leg, warm and trusting, unaware that his rescue had set in motion events that would test everything she believed about right and wrong. Dawn broke with the 300 Apache warriors positioned exactly as Willa had seen them in her nightmares. They sat their horses in perfect silence on the ridge. Above Pryor's ranch, their war paint vivid in the morning light, waiting for her decision. The dog limped beside her as she walked down the hill toward the ranch house, its tail wagging despite the tension that crackled through the air like lightning. Judson Pryor stood on his porch with a rifle in his hands, his face pale but determined. Behind him, 6 ranch hands crouched behind whatever cover they could find, their weapons trained on the hilltop. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who'd built his reputation on never showing weakness was now trembling with fear, while she, The woman he'd cast out for showing compassion held all the power. "Willa!" Pryor's voice cracked as she approached. "What did you do?" "What? Did you tell them?" She stopped 20 feet from the porch, the dog sitting calmly at her side. "I didn't tell them anything, Mr. Pryor. I just saved a life, and now they're here to collect payment for that life," Ghost Walker said, emerging from the shadows beside the barn. He moved with fluid grace, showing no concern for the weapons pointed in his direction. "The question is what form that payment will take." Pryor's rifle swung toward the Apache leader, but his hands were shaking too badly to aim properly. "Stay back. I won't let you destroy everything I've built. I have no interest in destroying anything," Ghost Walker replied calmly. "I'm here to honor a debt. Your former employee saved something precious to me. According to our law, I must repay that gift with something equally precious. What do you want?" Pryor's voice was barely a whisper. Ghost Walker looked at Willa, waiting for her signal. The moment stretched between them like a taut rope, and she realized that everything, Pryor's life, the ranch's future, the relationship between two peoples, hinged on what she said next. She thought about the frightened, wounded animal she'd found behind the barn. She thought about Pryor's reaction when he discovered her compassion. She thought about the choice between fear and understanding that every person in this territory faced every day. "Mr. Pryor," she said quietly, "do you remember what you told me when you fired me? You said I'd thrown away everything you'd built by showing weakness. Willa, please, but I didn't show weakness, I showed strength. The kind of strength it takes to risk everything for someone who can't help you back." She looked up at the warriors on the ridge, then back at her former employer. "Ghost Walker wants to offer you a treaty, real partnership between your ranch and his people. Protection, trade, mutual benefit. All because I treated his companion with the same respect I'd want someone to show mine." Pryor's face cycled through confusion, hope, and lingering fear. "And if I refuse," Ghost Walker's expression didn't change, "then you'll learn the same lesson, but through loss instead of gain. The choice has always been yours, Judson Pryor. Today, you simply can't avoid making it." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Pryor lowered his rifle and looked directly at Willa. "What would you do?" Willa looked at the man who'd cast her out for showing kindness, then at the 300 warriors waiting for her judgment. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. But for the first time since this began, she felt completely certain of her answer. "I choose courage over fear," she said simply. "The same way I did when I found an injured dog behind your barn." Pryor stared at her for a long moment, then slowly set his rifle down on the porch railing. "Ghost Walker," he called out, his voice steadier now. "What exactly are you offering?" The Apache leader stepped forward, his painted face grave, but peaceful. "Safe passage for all your cattle drives through our territory, protection from raiders and mountain cats for your livestock, access to the best water sources during dry seasons, and most importantly, an end to the fear that has poisoned this land for too long, and in return, fair trade, medical supplies when our people need them, grain during harsh winters, respect for the boundaries we both call sacred." Ghost Walker gestured toward the warriors on the ridge. "These men will spread word throughout every Apache band from here to the Great River. Pryor's ranch is under our protection. Any who harm what belongs to you will answer to us." Pryor's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. A partnership with the Apache Nation would make his ranch not just secure, but the most valuable property in 3 territories. No other rancher could offer buyers guaranteed safe passage or protection from raids. "Why?" Pryor asked, looking between Ghost Walker and Willa. "Why go to all this trouble?" Ghost Walker placed his hand on the dog's head, scratching behind its ears with obvious affection. "Because this woman taught me something I had forgotten. Strength isn't about who you can defeat. It's about who you choose to save. Pryor walked slowly down the porch steps, approaching Willa with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. "I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you a job, a better one." "The position is foreman," Ghostwalker added with what might have been amusement. "Someone needs to manage this new partnership, someone both peoples trust." Willa felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around at the faces surrounding her. Pryor no longer hostile but grateful, Nolan grinning with relief and pride, Ghostwalker regarding her with genuine respect, and the dog tail wagging as it sensed the tension finally breaking. 6 months later, Willa Shepherd supervised the largest cattle drive in territorial history, with Apache scouts ensuring safe passage and buyers from 4 states eager to purchase livestock from the legendary protected ranch. Pryor's operation had tripled in size. Nolan had been promoted to her assistant, and Ghostwalker's visits had become a monthly tradition that both peoples looked forward to. The dog, fully healed and more spoiled than any working animal had a right to be, split its time between the ranch house and the Apache camp, serving as a living symbol of what was possible when courage chose compassion over fear. And every morning, when Willa walked out to check the horses, she remembered that the most important decisions weren't always the safest ones, but they were always the ones that let you sleep peacefully at night. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.